What's going on, creators? Yeah, I just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. And today I like to talk a little bit about magical thinking versus just an understanding about manifestation and how you can use that distinguishing characteristic to have a little bit more faith in the bridges of incidence as it's unfolding. If you're a student of Neville Goddard and the law of assumption, you'll understand the bridges of incidence is basically when you live in the end state, and like maybe that's abundance, for example, and the bridges of incidence get you from a state of scarcity to abundance through a bunch of activities, a bunch of life situations and life obstacles, challenges, whatever. And it's when you connect the dots looking backwards, you see how your consciousness was evolved from a state of scarcity, lack, all that kind of fear-based thinking, to abundance, consciousness, more towards unity, oneness, connectivity of all things, and how you really start to put on this metaphysical principle of what is on the inside is being externalized into the outer events of your life. And so to really make a change, you start to steward what is already manifested, which is a direct reflection of your thoughts, beliefs, assumptions from yesterday, is confronting you today. And so with that understanding in mind, magical thinking has more to do with the fact that you're thinking that you'll never be the one that has to do anything, which I feel like is an error. I feel like part of like the bridges of incidence is taking new action and having to evolve your consciousness by facing your fear, these different life situations that you might be afraid to do, which is actually what you're desiring to do in a lot of ways. Like music is a really good example where it's like some people can dream about being in a band and playing in front of a bunch of people, but maybe there's fear of like crowds and stage fright or whatever is holding them into a certain level of consciousness. By magical thinking, it's thinking that you'll be able to just overcome that without ever facing it. By understanding manifestation, you realize that was brought to you so that you can do it, so that it can be done through you. And that's the biggest distinguishing thing between magical thinking is just like, poof, the problem's gone without me having to be involved in it, without me having to evolve my consciousness, without me having to face any type of fear, without me having to grow any type of faith. It's more like I just sit here and poof, my life will just be magically different. And so another good example is like what just recently happened with my vehicle. I was like driving to a doctor's appointment about 25 miles away from my house, and I was just thinking about how wonderful it was that I had a vehicle that's paid off, that was working. My wife had a vehicle that's paid off and is working. She's able to go do her jobs. I was able to go do this errand. Life is not being as coordinated as it used to be. It used to be we'd have to share a vehicle, and it's like I'd have to really organize my day to get the kids around, to get this going. It was just a pain in the ass. And so thinking that, not even 2 seconds later though, I looked down at the gauges of my vehicle, and my car was overheating. The oil pressure light was on. It's just like, oh great, my car's all fucked up. And so I was able to get it home through just all day of just driving, parking, letting it cool down, drive, park, and it's just like all day event. And so that was like, it's been on my radar, and magical thinking would be like, oh, I'm just going to turn the car on and this problem is just going to be just magically gone without me having to do anything, which, on some level, maybe that could happen. All things are possible with God. And so it's not to limit what's going on, but also realizing that everything that you're experiencing is going to be what you're already used to, because the thing with metaphysics and manifesting is like we've already been doing it our whole life. It's not different than what we've actually been doing. Only difference is where we were doing it unconsciously, and in a lot of ways manifesting our fears, not willing, not on purpose. It's just what happens when you start worrying and living in states of fear and separation. You start to see outer events as being separate. You start seeing secondary causes, and you start seeing all of this stuff, and then as you believe that, then you double down on it, and you see it even more. And so it's this downward spiral that starts to happen. It's just what happens when you start believing fear, and that fear prison just starts getting more and more obvious as like your world starts getting smaller and smaller, and just, oh, I'm afraid to quit my job, I'm afraid to do this, I'm afraid to live, I'm afraid of existential threats and viruses and fear, and it's like, to me, from my understanding of the Bible, that kind of state of mind is equated with death. That is death, that pattern. And so getting out of that, involves growing your faith, because the thing with fear and the future especially, is you have people that spend the present moment chronically in states of fear and hysteria about what could happen tomorrow, which is an illusion because it's only ever now. And so they get stuck in this feedback loop. And, part of like magical thinking and getting out of like that kind of thing is you face the fears, you face what's bothering you, you confront it head on. And so like when it comes to like my vehicle, I got it home, I start looking at, what could be wrong, it's like, so I start just kind of like troubleshooting it, start with like simple things of like, replacing the coolant cap, just to see if that was doing something, because there's steam and shit coming out of the reservoir, and there's just like all this shit going on from it overheating. And so it's like, okay, maybe the cap's just bad. You try it, and nope, it's still overheating. So it's like, my thought was like, okay, well, I'll put a new thermostat in it, maybe that'll fix it. Well, as I'm fucking with the thermostat housing, it's got 3 bolts, one of which is like kind of a bitch to get to, and like the previous mechanic or whatever rounded the bolt. And so I'm sitting there fucking with it, and like eventually get it to a point where I took it from bad to worse to fucking nuclear worse, in the sense that I decided to start cutting into the bolt and shit, and so as I'm cutting into the bolt, just because I was pissed that it was rounded and I couldn't get it off, and it's like I already had the thermostat, which is only like $10, but it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna cut, then I start cutting into it, and then I realized that I'm not getting a very good angle, because what I was trying to do is like cut a slit into the bolt so I could stick a flathead screwdriver in and just get it out, because it was in a plastic housing. So it's like, it wouldn't take much to get it to come out. And my thought was probably not even really thinking, but trusting though in the fact that everything's working out for my benefit, because there's so many hysterical thoughts of like, oh, what if I break my vehicle, what if this costs thousands of dollars, what if I can't figure it out, what if I can't get to jobs, what if the magical thinking, for example, is, this is just going to go away without me acknowledging it, or like anything. I'm just going to turn the car on, and the previous times that it overheated, all repetition all the time, every time I turn it on, drive it for 5 minutes, it overheats. Well, this time it'll be different. That kind of magical thinking is really kind of more in alignment with insanity, expecting a different result, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So that's kind of how I classify the magical thinking element of things. Not to get, not to say all things aren't possible, but everything is a reflection of what you believe. So if it's way out there from what you believe, then it's probably not going to be possible to you till you build up to it. And so it's like taking exactly what you have, it's going to work how you already kind of figure it, because everything has already been a manifestation, where in the past it was unconsciously creating worst case scenarios, doubling down on undesirable states. Well, now using that same understanding, you can use it as a blessing to realize, oh, well, I can impress my subconscious mind with optimism, with hope, with just an understanding that all things are working out for my good, that I will be able to fix this problem, assume that you'll be able to, solve this, that God's going to help you solve it, that you are connected with infinite intelligence will teach you how to fix this problem and lead you through the correct understanding. And so, with that, as I'm working on the vehicle, it's like having that kind of mindset that, God's going to help me figure this out. I'm not alone in the situation, that it's all part of a divine thing, that it's happening for a reason. I might not understand it yet, but it'll be okay. And so as I'm cutting this shit, which was not the right thing to do, but I was doing it anyway, I was like stuck by this cover, and I didn't see what was like underneath the cover. I just thought, well, if I took the cover off, then I could get a better angle to cut this fucking thing out of there. And so as I took the cover off, then I realized, hey, this vehicle has a belt drive over on this side of the engine too, where I thought I thought the water pump and all that stuff was like powered by the serpentine belt, where the alternator and all the other stuff was being powered by. Well, come to find out that the water pumps on that side is obviously like the belt broke, and that was why my car was fucked up. So I run, go get a belt, get it on there. 5-10 minutes later, the belt's on there, it's fixed. Well, then I fucked the thermostat housing up by cutting into it, so then I had a new problem. And so had to basically then go to the junkyard the following day. This was an all-day event yesterday, fucking with this. But, trusting and infinite intelligence that this is all going to work out, this is all part of a plan, that fear wants to creep in of like, oh, I'm wasting my whole day doing this, I'm not making any money, who knows if I can get this part out, all that kind of stuff. End up, long story short, getting it all figured out, get it installed after fucking with it all day. Now the car's running again. And so I'm really excited actually that fucking worked. I find vehicles to be one of the most frustrating things, but also one of the most satisfying things, because like when you fix it and you didn't have to spend thousands of dollars, taking it to somebody else, it's really like a rewarding sensation. And so, when it comes to using the law of assumption, the assumption is that I will be able to do this. Whereas magical thinking is, it will just magically happen just because my willpower. And that's part of like the stumbling block where it comes from the old mindset. When you start to realize that, your thoughts are important, they're powerful, and in the way that they can start to influence your perception, start to become externalized if you start to believe them. And that starts to become more of a reality for you, the more that you connect these dots and everything else, but not to say that, things don't magically happen, because as I was like driving the car, it did start to overheat again, but then I pulled over into a driveway, and then an air bubble, whatever, and then the heat came on and everything started working again. And so, it's one of those things. Sometimes things can happen, sometimes they don't. But, it just really depends on your understanding. It's like, if you understand that things are get done through you, it's like with the guitar. I mean, you're not just going to wake up one day and just be like, I can just play it like somebody who's been playing it for 20 years because I'm just born with that ability. That's one of those magical thinking. Oh, you're just born with that. And it's like, no, you develop it through repetition. It's being done through you. And so as far as like manifesting goes, having an assumption that it's just going to be magical, I feel like is an error that keeps you in a state of waiting. At least that's how I feel about it. Not to say that, that's universally true. If you believe the exact opposite fervently, I'm sure that's what you experience. But the thing of, moving forward is like developing more and more things through your own ability to either steward, take care of, through repetition, like master something. And that involves your body too. I mean, you see that through like, fitness, repetition, through playing an instrument, repetition. It's all about facing that fear that's holding you into a smaller level of consciousness, because that's not even who you are. And so it's like, the more that you let go of those fears by facing it, by you moving through it, the more that you evolve your consciousness, the more that these problems aren't even really problems. It's like, with my handyman business, for example, it's like, some of the jobs that I was like doing when I first started, I used to be so nervous that I'd like underquote it, fuck the job up, million things, and then I'd have a lot of drama and stuff. But, as things have developed, you face those initial fears, you face those dramas. Well, then you stop having so many dramas, or you stop reacting so, it's the end of the world, there's some problem. Let's freak out about it for 20-30 minutes and then spiral out of control and have our whole day be ruined by it. That's kind of like, example of the old cursed mindset, where then it's like when you stub your toe in the morning and then you're late for work and then you hit every red light and it just gets worse and worse and worse and compounds. It's just, you can choose to, unconsciously let that spiral you out, or you can start to consciously choose to think differently. And it's all about, consciously choosing what you're thinking about and what you're choosing to believe and how you're choosing to experience the day. And the more that you put on that faith that, things are working out, that it's a divine order of things, that things are working perfectly, it's based on this assumption about who you are in Christ, that who you are in Christ is connected with God through consciousness. It's like you can look at what the world labels as the subconscious mind, and look at that as like a divine connection, because it's always working perfectly. Your heart's beating by itself, you're breathing on unconsciously, your eyes are blinking, your moisture level of your eyes are just automatically taken care of, your hearing, you don't have to think about the drum or whatever, the eardrum vibrating and how that even works. There's all this shit that you don't got to worry about. And the more that you connect with that energy of what is already inherently there, the more that you start to trust it, and the more that you start to just understand how things are working, and how you're being led through these bridges of incidents, and not to become so reactive to the 3D when things are maybe presenting as undesirable. Looking at that as an opportunity that you're going to level up in your consciousness, that God's going to help you through it, that God's going to fight the battle for you, that you'll be led to the correct understanding or the correct action or the correct thing to say. All of that kind of stuff is about your faith. And the more that your faith is strengthened, and the more that you just know that this is how things are going to, how things just operate, it's just water's wet. Oh, my, water's dry, didn't you know that? It's like, come on, dude. It's like, not everything's relative like that, but, if you want to think that way, you can think that way. And for you can take a dry shower if you want to, but like, but just wanted to get on here and kind of share that understanding about magical thinking versus like an understanding about just how manifestation actually just works. It's how you have an inner vision, and then you'll be directed and guided to the next action that's going to be done through you. It's like it's ultimately you plant the seeds, but God makes it sprout and do all the things that a plant does that's beyond your control. It's a cooperative thing. It's like what you're impressing to the subconscious, what you're telling yourself. Are you telling yourself fearful, limiting things, or are you dropping those fearful beliefs, thinking more faith-filled thoughts, expecting more faith-filled results, and expecting that, don't need to really battle and control the 3D, but, looking at it through a non-reactive lens, but almost as like creatively detached, where you can like see, oh, okay, well, these are my past beliefs. Oh, I believe that there's always that one bolt that's a bitch in automotive, and so it's like, oh, okay, well, then that's not surprising that you experience that. So it's like, let's let that belief go. Let's drop that thought of like, oh, this is going to be hard, and replace it with, oh, this is going to be effortlessly easy. This is going to work out so well. This is going to work out even better. It's all about what that narrative, that inner conversation, the expectancy that you have, expecting that it's going to work out versus expecting disaster, expecting fear, expecting doomsday. That's all on you and your inner conversation. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify kind of that magical thinking versus kind of more of a manifestation mindset, where it's like, okay, well, there's something that's going on. I need to take some sort of an action, if that's moving from scarcity to abundance. Maybe some homeless person asked you for some change, and in the past where you're in scarcity, it's like, oh no, if I give $1, I lose $1. Where you're in abundance, where it's like, oh, we're all connected, so it's like if I give to another, I give to myself, and it'll come back to me multiplied. Well, that's a different belief, and then as you believe it, that's what you experience. And so it's all about evolving the current manifestation, the thing that's already happened. So it's like you look what's going on in the present moment, not being super reactive to it, or just like wanting to attack it or whatever, but just like being detached from it in a way that you can see the ugly to make it nice. You can see the scarcity, and you can change that through a new action to abundance. It's the same flow every time. And so it's like how you do one thing is applicable for everything. And so it's like if you've mastered your instrument, where it's like you have that inner vision how you want it to sound, you're able to demonstrate that perfectly. You can do the same thing with your body and fitness. You can do the same thing with your relationships. You can do the same thing with your skill levels. It's all really one thing. And once you really grasp that, then you can start to move from magical thinking to like just a mindset of who you are in Christ, that this is how it is when you're blessed, when you are impressing the subconscious and working on that relationship with your own mind. And in a lot of ways, that's your connection with your Creator, because there's just so many times that you're talking to yourself, realize that God is hearing your thoughts, and it's listening. That's like when you become more mindful and are in a state of presence where you're able to observe your thoughts, you're then one with the subconscious, or one with that divine connection that's always there listening, always there rewarding with it, whatever. It doesn't matter if it's rewarding you with curses or blessings. That it doesn't. It's very impersonal. This kind of dynamic. It's like you'll get rewarded with what you fear just as much as you'll be rewarded with what you love. It just depends on what you believe and what you believe you deserve. And, it's all based on your identity concept. And so if your identity concept is separate from God, that God's out in space somewhere, that you're a separate brain in a body that's not connected to nothing, well, that's your ego identity that's unconscious. But your who you are in Christ is conscious, where you realize that your subconscious mind is part of your connection with your Creator. And it's a big deal, what you're impressing to it. And so, because in a lot of ways you're just like talking to your Creator. And if you're expecting disaster and you're saying all these fears and worst case scenarios, don't be surprised, especially if you believe that that's an option, then that manifests. That's what the cursed mind did. It creates fucking undesirable situations, but you're blessed. And that's important to keep in mind always, that you are blessed now. The old you was cursed, but that's not who you are anymore. And so with that being said, I think I'm about. So I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things. Appreciate you, your spiritual support and your physical support. Thank you for that. Put it to good use. Link in the description. And until the next now, God bless.